Welcome back to Cal Park Bros. Jason and I are fresh off regaling the high notes and the low notes of the start of the Olympics in Tokyo. Segment 2, we're going to talk about the National Football League and COVID protocols. Now that some of these teams are going to have a mixed bag of vaccinated players and vaccinated coaches and staff, and not vaccinated coaches and um, not vaccinated players. So Jason and I were talking yesterday about a article in CNN where we basically lays out how this is going to look according to um, the CNN article. If a National Football League cannot be rescheduled and is canceled due to a COVID-19 outbreak among unvaccinated players, that team will have to forfeit and will be credited with a loss, the NFL said in a league-wide memo obtained by CNN. The new rule makes being unvaccinated a competitive disadvantage this year, all part of the league's push to get players and staff inoculated ahead of the coming season. The NFL has said that any team that vaccinates 85% of its players and staff can relax their safety protocols and has applied looser rules to vaccinated players. If a game cannot be rescheduled within the current 18-week schedule and is canceled due to a COVID outbreak among non-vaccinated players on one of the competing teams, the club with the outbreak will forfeit the contest and will be deemed to have played 16 games for purposes of draft, waiver priority, etc. For purposes of playoff seeding, the forfeiting team will be credited with a loss and the other team will be credited with a win, the NFL memos sent Thursday states. Oh, it gets better, Jason. In addition, if a game is postponed and cannot be rescheduled, players from both teams will not receive their scheduled salary. The memo states the team with the outbreak will be responsible for any additional expenses incurred by the opposing team. This is also in response to the fact that at least two coaches are currently not able to actually be with the team that they were coaching with due to these COVID protocols. So, Jason, what are your thoughts on this so far?
Well, first of all, I think we all have to understand that definitely the NFL is going to step up its game when it comes to their COVID protocols. And they definitely, for at least for training camp in the preseason, they definitely have updated the protocols to make a big difference in what fully vaxxed players can do and limitations that the non-fully vaxxed players can do. And we'll go into that maybe a little bit later. But when it comes to them setting the stage to say, hey, when the season starts, if you like last year, there were a few games that had to get rescheduled, so forth, and it became kind of a hassle to get the games in, to spread them out between their last game and give them the time between the game after that, so forth and so forth. But in that same memo, basically the NFL told its teams that we have no plans on having the 19th week of the season. It's pretty much we're going to play all 200 something of our games in the 18 weeks. And if we had to cancel a game because of COVID or because of somebody who was unvaxxed, because of because of a COVID outbreak or whatever, we're not making that up outside of the 18 weeks. So you can't make it up. There's your loss. Boom. Like I said, not only are the teams going to lose finance money from not playing those games, they're going to have to fork out money to their other team for that team to have to lose games. So they're doubling down on this. It's like, okay, this is what we're going to do, and to make it more of an incentive for you to make sure you're doing what you're doing. Here's another little thing we're going to throw at you: losing money two ways. So I think in a way that's good. Um, Definitely they're being serious about it, and hopefully that will encourage some of the players to also be serious about it. Now, of course, we know that you mentioned the two coaches who were let go. We're not going to say fired. We can say parted ways. You know, but we know those two coaches were let go because they weren't vaccinated. They said they're not going to. But we also know there's going to be players who are dead set against it as well. That stands to reason, and that's fine. That's their choice. Is what it is. I know Cole Beasley was one last month who was really big about that, not getting vaccinated and stuff like that. Um, so just like I said before in our own vax situations, you got to make a decision for yourself whether you're going to get vaccinated or not. If not, these are the protocols you got to follow. If you don't, it's probably going to cause an issue with your team. But in addition to that, if you bring COVID into our locker room, causing an outbreak to miss games, now that's going to cause division against the teammates because now you're causing us games because you chose not to get vaxxed and now you brought an outbreak into us. Now how they going to figure out who brought what into where? I'm sure they have their methods to figure that out. But that's probably going to cause some division amongst the players when it comes to, and it probably already has, when it comes to the vax versus unvax, which is kind of that war I mentioned before in one of our previous episodes when it comes to that division between the vax and unvax when it comes to just the general population. Um, Overall, I think it's a good measure by the NFL. I'm very curious for week one to see what happens going forward. I hate to say this, but I'm kind of hoping we get to see what happens. I'm kind of hoping, you know, not to the point of somebody dying, but I'm almost kind of hoping that we see what happens if somebody unvaxxed brings in an outbreak and has to miss a game.
I
I
almost
want to see, yeah,
almost went Umar Johnson. I'm like, I beg your pardon.
yeah. I mean, again, obviously, I hope it doesn't happen, but the little devil on my shoulder is kind of saying, I hope it happens because I want to see the chaos that comes along with it. Because I'm not necessarily for week one because I feel like they can find a way to reschedule that game somewhere in the time. What's going to happen if this outbreaks happens in week 17, week 18, when you have no time to make up? So, and that can cost somebody their playoff chances right there because you forfeit a game and a loss in that critical last week of the season. You, as we all know, in this current NFL, that last game can be important for you. Um, so yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this turns out. If in the case it happens where somebody forfeits a game because of an unvaxxed player bringing in COVID into their locker room. But that's just my thought. What do you think?
Well, one, I think in a weird way, with these rather creative mechanisms to effectively mitigate the spread of COVID, in a weird way, they basically trying to say, "Hey, man, how bad y'all want to win?" Um, and given some of the crazy ass stuff that players are expected to take in the name of winning, painkillers and the such, um, the jab doesn't seem too far of a stone's throw away to me. Um, but really, especially, I remember last year when Baltimore's strength conditioning coach was effectively contact traced out as the patient zero. They say, "Yeah, man, you the reason all this COVID in here." And turns out Baltimore had at least 4 different strains of COVID-19 in their facility, but 3 of them had not spread, and it was the 4th one that the strengthening and conditioning coach brought in. So that is why you're seeing this push from the league to say, "Hey, man, we know there's going to be a new flavor of this shit coming down through not just facilities, the rest of the populace." A lot of these places are going to have, full stadiums. So they're doing what they can, not only to ensure that the business of football continues on, but also that, we're still trying to get a handle on this virus. So in a weird way, the National Football League is better at trying to sell the vaccine than Fauci is.
You know, I do want to talk about the protocol modifications that were made back in mid June when it comes to vaxxed and unvaxxed players in the NFL. And by the way, this is an article I found on NFL.com, by the way. And they do state that, again, back in mid June, these protocols are only for right now for training camp and the preseason. I'm sure they'll use these for their regular season as well, but I think they're kind of limiting it that way to leave the door open again for them to change it again. But let me kind of go over some of this real quick. So kind of the first line is that fully vaxxed players don't have to do any daily testing. That's not required, but not vaxxed has to test every day. Makes sense. Masking is not required at the club facility or during team travel for those that are vaxxed, but those that aren't vaxxed has to mask all the time during travel or the club facility. No distancing required for vaxxed. The non-vaxxed have to distance, which this one in particular, I'm very curious about how and if the teams are actually going to enforce this. But no quarantine required after a high risk exposure for those that are vaxxed. Obviously, the opposite for those that are unvaxxed. Travel restrictions have to be followed by those not vaxxed. Let's see, 15 player limit in the weight room when it comes to those who aren't vaxxed. So, I wonder how that's going to work out because there's no capacity limits for those who are unvaxxed. But are they all going to be in there together? Those 15 unvaxxed can be in there with everybody who is vaxxed, separate times. How's that going to work? I don't know. Those who are not vaxxed cannot eat in the cafeteria. They have to be physically distant to the meal rooms. May not eat with teammates. Staff must do grab and go meals. Nothing in the cafeteria. So they're really segregating these people in that regard. Those are unvaxxed cannot do any social media marketing or sponsorship activities in regards to with the team. They cannot use the steam room or sauna, and they cannot leave the team hotel to eat in restaurants. They may not interact with anyone outside of the team traveling party during team travel. Some of this stuff makes total sense. The one about masking, though, when it comes to the vax not having to wear masks, I wonder if they'll change that since the CDC is now supposedly going to announce, if they haven't done it yet today, that those who are vaxxed need to mask up again. But some of this stuff makes sense. But I'm also wondering, how are they going to enforce some of this stuff?
The same way uh, the the country expected us to enforce wearing masks in retail stores. Like, imagine some 350-pound lineman with no mask. Are you really going to try and engage with that person? This person that can literally snap you in fucking half.
Well, hang on now, because I hear you, but it seems like the people that would be enforcing this stuff though would be team representatives. It wouldn't be like a hotel employee. It would be somebody from the team because somebody from the hotel is not going to care.
I mean, they
Because
might care,
no, they're
but
not.
a person might make a business decision. I mean, we've seen so much craziness in the last 15 months where people literally are saying, my body, my choice, but I'm totally going to have this Trader Joe's all COVID because I don't want to wear a mask. And you've had retail employees basically said, okay, this is bullshit. I got to say something. I got to do something. All jokes aside. Now, the NFL, and effectively, it sounds like the 32 owners have effectively gone ahead with this, is that they're saying, man, look, don't fuck up your game check. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like they are, in a weird way, taking all these precautions because they don't want anything to stop the money. I mean, the National Football League is a $4 billion industry and counting. Hell, I got to figure out what I'm doing with my fantasy league now. So the fact that they put in mechanisms for forfeits just says that, hey, we have a business continuity plan, and even if you are a complete idiot and a super spreader, you will pay the most price out of all. If the moron happens to be on your team, guess what? It's no different than that person getting a 15-yard penalty in a clutch situation in week 17. That's what it sounds like. I agree with you wholeheartedly. A lot of those protocols make a lot of sense. Hell, we might be adopting some of those soon with this Delta variant coming up. So
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but I mean, every NFL team what consists of what? As far as the actual team, like as far as the active players, like 52 people. Is that what it is?
Around there. Yeah,
Not to mention the
50.
practice. Yeah, and then the practice squads, which may not do any traveling, but they're still involved in some of this stuff here, and then and the coaches, So, and on every team, every single team probably has at least one, two, or three dudes that are against all this stuff and will do what they can not to follow. Maybe not all this stuff, but there's something on here they're not going to agree with or want to do, and they're going to try to get around it. So, I guess what I'm saying is, who's going to be that person on the team, not necessarily the players, but in the franchise, in the facility, that's going to be monitoring this stuff to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. In addition to keeping track of who's vaccinated and who isn't, because I know just from my job what they're doing to make sure everybody's staying safe or whatnot. But we don't have an entire league of protocols coming out that kind of segregate everybody. You know, which this clearly is, which isn't a bad thing. But like I said, there's going to be players on every team that want to buck the system and not want to do all this stuff. Who's going to be that person monitoring all this stuff to make sure every single player? Obviously, you can control what they do outside of this stuff here, the team related stuff. But even within the team related stuff, who's monitoring the activities, making sure everybody does that? And is that guy monitoring? Is he going to be lenient with anybody to say, "Oh, okay, only 15 guys are allowed in the weight room, but you're number 16, but I'll let you go ahead and go in anyway." So who's monitoring that guy? You know. So and again, I'm not trying to sound complaining or anything like that, but I just kind of wonder, just knowing how people are when it comes to following COVID protocols outside of the NFL players, just in general. I'm just wondering, hey, because like when I go to the gym, I'm pretty much one of two people who are still wearing the masks, and I know all the people in that gym ain't vaccinated, so there's no way. And I
Right.
went out in this past week. I went out in public indoor places, and not everybody's wearing masks there, and I know all those people aren't vaccinated, so again, people are going to look to buck the system just because they don't want to do something. Whether it's wearing masks, staying out of the weight room, or avoiding the rest of the team in the cafeteria, stuff like that. So and then we may find this out once a team gets busted for all this stuff and has to lose a game about who did what, when, and where. It's going to come out eventually. Maybe not during the season, but at some point in regards to who doesn't give a what and who does. So, um, yeah. So there's that, and I also find it interesting that, and I know why, because there's a financial difference. Is that two coaches were let go because exactly, because two coaches were let go because they didn't want to get vaxxed, but yet there's nothing for nothing.
That's kind of repurposed.
What?
I mean, I'm looking at the Washington Post right now. Uh, Rick Dennison, this is the Vikings offensive line coach.
Right.
They put him in a new role. I mean,
Which is
you're saying let go.
what's the new role?
He's still an assistant coach. They named him a senior offensive advisor, which sounds just like another fancy ass way of saying he helping dog.
Let go from his position.
Is he still getting a check?
I don't know. Is he? Ask him. I'm not. I'm not his wife. I don't know what his bank account looks like.
I'm saying unless the guy actually got cut loose and is no longer associated with the team, I don't think we can use the term let go.
Parted ways.
I don't even know if parted ways makes sense.
Is
Hell,
he in the same position he was in 2 days ago?
what's the
No.
difference? What's the difference between senior offensive advisor and
If he's getting a pay cut, that's probably the difference.
well, to your point, I am not his accountant.
Well, the point I was going into, which still applies no matter what, is that they're taking all these measures with coaches in regards to, okay, you're not getting vaccinated. Here's your punishment, basically. But there's no punishment to the players.
Didn't you just run through a list of whole shit that they
No,
were
no,
all
not those aren't punishments. Those are not punishments. They still get to keep their jobs. They're not getting demoted. So what I'm saying is, they're choosing to let again, not every team's done this. This is only 2 coaches who lost their positions. But what
All
I'm
right.
saying is, there's no.
I gotta go ahead.
You okay over there?
I want to let you speak, but I absolutely want to come back to this whole they're not getting demoted piece. Like there
Because they're
is no
not.
NFL contracts are not even worth the paper they're fucking printed on. So it's irrelevant. You could sign
What?
NFL contracts aren't worth the fucking money, worth the paper they're actually printed on.
Okay,
It's
that what's the point?
anyway. So you're talking about, well, they're not punishing the players. If a
Because they're
motherfucker,
not.
Jason, if player X was found to have violated team rules, the organization is subject to sanction them however they deem fit. If they wanted to cut them, they would.
First of all, we're not talking about team rules here. Number two,
What are we talking?
okay, okay, well, fine then. What? Show me the articles talking about any players let go because they chose not to get vaccinated, right?
And just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it will happen. You're talking about the potential for a player to be cut because they fucked up a squad season. I'm telling
Oh,
you,
no. I'm not talking about because they messed up a season. I'm talking about as of right now, coaches were lost their positions because they chose not to get vaccinated. Has any player as of right now been cut from their team because they chose not to get vaccinated?
rosters haven't even been finalized, dude. You're putting the cart before the horse. That's why your
Listen,
statement is false.
well, no. Actually, it's not false because if season had not started, but players are still under contract. Am I correct? Yes. Players.
Players
No,
are
go ahead.
until
Go
they're
ahead.
under contract.
Say
So
what? Say again.
players are under contract until their team deems they are no longer under contract because that's how NFL contracts work.
That's what I'm saying. So somebody could be let go right now because they chose not to get vaccinated. That's what I'm saying. So why has not happened? Because my point is,
You're
what's the
saying
difference
because
here?
it hasn't happened yet that why are we worried about that's going to happen or not?
So then why are they cutting coaches now?
You're making it up. No one's been cut yet.
You get the point, bro. You get my point. You get my point. Why are people losing their positions because they're not vaccinated? Why are these coaches losing their spots, but players are not? Because there are plenty of players who haven't been vaxxed yet. So why not? My point is, what's the difference? They're still commingling with each other. So why are these coaches being? I guess it's a question to ask the Vikings and Patriots since they've gone to the point of removing a coach from their position, quote unquote, air quote. So what's the difference? So other than financial, when it comes to a player's contract and maybe have to pay him out whatever on the salary cap, what other than that, what's the difference? Because there's the same position, they're in the same situation when it comes to their commingling. So, you know, I just find that interesting. I know you're going to say whatever argument you want to make, which I'm going to shoot down after that anyway, but go ahead.
I'm good. I just find it fascinating that you've effectively put the cart before the horse, and you've stated that you're trying to compare something, which is well, one, no one's watching football because of the coaches. We're watching football because of the players. I don't draft fucking assistant coaches. I draft defenses, wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, etc., etc.
And that's fine. That's what I'm saying. Why is that the only difference? That shouldn't matter though. If the importance is safety when it comes to COVID, then what's it matter? I'm not saying if you're the Patriots go cut Cam Newton because he's not vaccinated. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that because I get that.
They
Like
might
Jimmy
cut
Johnson
Cam.
used to. It's
They
like Jimmy
might cut,
Johnson used to say back in the day.
and also he's a super spreader.
It's like I'm saying, like Jimmy Johnson used to say back in the day, the difference in what players do when it comes to the 52nd man on the roster, if sleeping in the meetings can be, he's going to get tossed from the team. But if Emmitt Smith's doing it, he's going to wake up Emmitt and say, hey, you need to pay attention. There's a big difference. I get that. But what I'm saying is every unvaxxed player in the NFL ain't Cam Newton. They ain't the starting quarterback for their team. You know what I'm saying? So, and like I do agree with you, maybe that will happen. But I'm wondering is why the Patriots and Vikings made the decision right now to remove the coaches from their positions and not any of the players yet.
Simply because they don't have to.
Well, exactly. They didn't have to do this with the coaches either, but they did it. So again, I say What's the difference? Why now?
Because those are the rules and regulations for the tier 1 personnel. If you
Which
know
it,
those
what
are the
it,
rules and regulations for those types of people within your organization, it seems to be a smart business move that if you have to move those people, if you have to um, adjust for the sake of the success of your organization, seems like a good business strategy to accommodate, does it not?
you know who else is in tier one?
Who?
Coaches are in tier one. You know who else is in tier one?
Who?
Players. So you spotting all that tier one stuff, great, but it applies to players too, right? Yes.
I mean, perhaps what they're hoping for, Jason, is that all of the restrictions, should you as a player not be vaccinated, perhaps they are simply saying, hey, here's our line in the sand. They're not saying you won't get paid. They're not saying you can't work out. They're not saying you can't play. Uh, This is no different than fucking Lollapalooza, man. I mean, they're literally saying you either got to show proof of vaccination or you got to have a negative test within X amount of days before the big fucking show.
Great. Good.
They didn't say if you didn't get the vaccine, you can't listen to fucking Green Day. What the fuck?
Once again, Terrence goes off on an irrelevant tangent, but okay.
Relevant tangent. Hashtag relevant tangent. I love it. Well,
Anyway,
I I look forward to another successful NFL campaign, and I look forward to someone saying or doing something really, really stupid that's going to compromise their team's season.
it's going to happen.
Yep. That concludes the NFL COVID protocol segment. And coming up next, we're going to talk about the sports we love and the racist ass nicknames and logos that we loathe. Coming up next on Cal Park Bros.